Alright, y'all. Today we're going to be talking about how do we multiply complex numbers. How do we multiply? Multiplication. How do we times? How do we find the product of? All those are interchangeable. Now, remember, whenever we talk about multiplication, there are two very important terms that we want to look at. One of them is the distributive property, and then a little acronym that you've learned since middle school called FOIL, which stands for first, outer, inner, and last. Distributive property, FOIL is actually just an extension of the distributive property, but for example, if we had 2 times x plus 3, we would multiply or distribute this and get 2 times x is 2x plus 2 times 3 is 6. Or if you had like negative 5x minus 2, negative 5 times x is negative 5x, negative 5 times negative 2 is a positive 10. That's how we distribute. FOIL is whenever you have two binomials multiplied together, so like x plus 2 times x plus 3. Again, FOIL is just an extension of the distributive property, but if we were to use FOIL in this, x times x is x squared, that's first. Outer, so x times 3, so that'd be 3x. Inner, 2 times x would be 2x. And last, 2 times 3 would be 6. Add your like terms, so you'd end up getting x squared plus 5x plus 6. So with that being said, there are two things we have to look out for whenever we're multiplying complex numbers, and that is the distributive property as well as FOIL. Let's take a look at the distributive property first. Let's say I wanted you to multiply these two complex numbers, 4i and then 3 minus 5i. These are two separate complex numbers. You have the 4i and you have the 3 minus 5i. How would you multiply these? Well, you would distribute. And so what we do here is 4i times 3 would be 12i. 4i times negative 5i would be negative 20i squared. But you have to watch out because that's not my final answer. That's not the simplified answer. If you remember, I is the square root of negative 1, and I squared is negative 1. The reason why I make mention of that is, notice you have an I squared here. Well, I squared is negative 1. So I'm going to rewrite this as 12i minus 20 times negative 1, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So that gives us 12i plus 20, but if I want to write that in standard form, I have to put the real term first and then the imaginary part. So it would be 20 plus 12i. For foiling, remember our acronym, first, outer, inner, last. And so what we're going to have here is when we multiply first, we're going to get negative 14. Outer, we're going to get negative 35i. Inner, we're going to get positive 6i. And last, we're going to get positive 15i squared. Look for your like terms, and there are two, so that's going to give me negative 29i. And then remember, I squared is negative 1, so that's going to give me negative 14 minus 29i minus 15. Look for the like terms again, and that gives me my final answer of negative 29 minus 29i. And that's it for today's lesson. All right.